Welcome to Fairy Tale Access, where the head fairy's quest is to prove that fairy tales do exist in actual time, rather than once upon a time. Together, we will unravel the heroes, young and old, who turn dreams into reality. These are the people who still believe in happily ever after. The discoveries will bend even our most cynical non-believers into believing in fairy tales. Hey, welcome to Fairy Tale Access. Today we're going to talk to an author about the retelling of Snow White. The author is Abigail Manning, and this girl has a lot of imagination. Thanks for joining us from Knoxville, Tennessee by Skype. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great, thank you. This was such a fun book to read. It's the first time I really hated Snow White, though. So how did you come up with the theme for it?
So I kind of always thought about how Snow White is just this perfect princess who is beautiful, lives in a castle, all the animals love her, and it just kind of didn't seem right that she would be so humble from the start, where everyone looks at her like she's so pretty and perfect, and she would just kind of be like, oh yeah, no, I'm not like that. So I kind of decided to reverse what we all think of Snow White and make her a little bit less humble and a little bit more prideful and kind of stuck up, knowing that she's so beautiful, and kind of reverse the transition of just being sweet through and through to being a little bit harder to love, and then having to grow and mature in her situation with the hunter and everything.
That was such a great twist. It was really fun to read. It was just such a quick read because of it. So this is your niche market, right? You retell books. So where do you get the background? Do you enjoy children's books in general, or are you taking it more off of the Grimm fairy tales?
A little bit of both. So, as you can see, my first book was Snow White, but my second book is Goldilocks, which isn't actually a Grimm's fairy tale. It's a whole different set of fairy tales. But I have a background in early childhood education. I'm a nanny. I studied early childhood in college. I did a lot of daycares. And I read these fairy tales 1,000+ times to these kids over and over again. And I always kind of stopped and thought, what if I could make this entertaining for people more my age? Kind of twist the story and still keep a lot of the original elements from the Grimm tales or from the classic tales that we know, and just make it something that is reinvented.
Oh, that makes sense. I think you definitely did that. What's up with tea?
Oh my goodness. So I'm a huge tea enthusiast. So I have an entire tea bar, honestly, in my line of sight right now that is always stocked. And it's something that I always drink when I'm writing. I'll always have a cup of tea with me. And so I put it in my stories all the time for just no reason. Well, not no reason. Usually fits in with the story pretty well. But in the time period it's set at, there's usually a cup of tea is usually common. And so it's kind of like a little Easter egg in all my books, is like, where's the cup of tea? Because it's always there, because it's something that's always on my mind when I'm writing.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know I felt like having a cup of tea by the time I was in the middle. And what about, you're very good with not being overly descriptive, but being descriptive enough so we really understand the clothing. So do you have a background in that?
I do, actually. So aside from studying early childhood, I actually got my bachelor's degree in theater arts, and I specifically studied everything but acting. So I studied a little bit of, scenic. I studied lighting, and specifically I was really into costume design for a while. I even went to a competition in the States called ACTF, where I brought one of my designs to life for a kind of conceptual design. And so one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing when studying was researching different costumes from different eras, and we would sometimes sketch what we wanted to look for. And it was something that I really loved. It wasn't something that I loved enough to pursue as a full passion, but I love that I get to include that in my stories and kind of like really describe what the character's wearing and why it affects how they move, and make sure it matches with that time period, or even though it's a fantasy period, just kind of like tweak it a little bit. So even if it matches, it's still unique to that kind of fantasy world. And it's just something that I really love to play with and describe in the stories.
It was really beautifully done. All right, so there's also lots of food. And you look really tiny, so
Yeah, I actually really like baking as just another little side thing that I do. And yes, I'm very tiny and no amount of butter can fix that, unfortunately. I've tried, believe me. But I love like just baking a couple weird things here and there, especially sweets and stuff. My poor husband, who's trying to go on a diet, resents me for it, but there's cookies probably somewhere behind me too right now. But I love describing the food in the stories as well. Even when it's like, the grizzly crust of bread or something, it's just kind of fun to like imagine what that character is tasting and what they're going through. So I put a lot of that into it. All the meals, I like to describe like all the senses and everything. Those are my favorite things to describe probably in my stories is food and clothes, which I guess describes a lot about me as well.
no, but that's wonderful. It was just a lot of fun to read. And I just love the descriptive way you describe things. It really helped with the story and the whole adventure going on too.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you twist it? What's the challenge of rewriting these stories and making them interesting enough so that, your readers are tuned in? They really love them, by the way.
Thank you. So that was kind of the best part was figuring out how to twist it. And I usually kind of started with like, okay, what's going to be the twist? What's going to be the aha moment? And I can't go into too much detail without spoiling it, but I always wanted to kind of start from, okay, this is the story that we know, but what's one big thing that I can change that will be noticed off the bat? So like in Snow White, it's that Snow White's not super sweet to start off with. It's a story of maturity and humility and getting to that point. And it's not just a huntsman coming after her, it's an assassin who's sent to kill her for political gain from another country. And in Goldilocks, for example, which is my second book, Barely Free, I thought about it. I'm like, okay, so, everyone knows Goldilocks. She runs away to a house in the woods and, finds the Three Bears house. Well, why is she running? Maybe she's being chased by a bounty hunter because her parents want her to be forced into an arranged marriage. Okay, let's run with that. So I just kind of wanted to start from square one and then just reverse everything that made it childlike and expand from there.
How many books have you written?
So currently I have 3 published. The 4th one is going to be available for pre-order probably when this airs. And the 5th one is already done and going through editing. So there's going to be 5 books total in the series, and they're all done just going through the stages of coming out.
All right. So number 1 is Snow White. Number 2 was Goldilocks. What's 3, 4, and 5?
Number 3 is Cinderella. Number 4 is Thumbelina. And number 5 is going to be Rapunzel.
Oh, is there any information you can give us on those? Any teasers?
On Cinderella, I can. It's called Framed in Florals, and it's a very garden-enthused Cinderella. So she's very much like has her stepmother and stepsister sort of the situation, but she's not a very submissive Cinderella. She's very sassy and kind of snarks back. And the whole title of it, Framed in Florals, is she goes to the ball and essentially gets framed for murder. So that's kind of the concept that runs with that one. And my 4th one, Thumbelina, which is coming out in June at the moment, is definitely, it follows more of the story of Thumbelina since a lot of people don't know it as much, but it's with the twist of, if you know the original Thumbelina, everyone's trying to marry Thumbelina because they think she's so cute and tiny as a woodland creature. Well, in this case, everyone's trying to marry her because they think she's a long-lost princess of a desolated kingdom, and they think marrying her will give them a crown. And they don't know whether or not she is or not. So it's all kind of a gamble of can she prove it, can she not?
Oh,
and Rapunzel, I don't have enough to spoil yet because it's not ready.
All right. And now, in Poisoned Heart, she's really self-centered. We hate her at the beginning.
Yes.
I'm like, wow, she's like posh, pampered. But I love that you had that what comes around goes around twist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's very, as you said, self-centered. She's not a very likable character to start off with. She's raised in a castle. Everyone thinks she's beautiful. And it's very much because as people know in Snow White, there's a huntsman involved. When she's scared out of her home by an assassin, she really has to humble herself in kind of a princess in the pauper or prince in the pauper situation where she has to blend in with the common folk. And, she hides with 7 women who work in a laundry mill. So it's very much of humility of like, this is what other people live by. Why am I treating people lesser than what they are when I'm now in that same situation. I don't like being treated like this. So it's very much a kind of maturity growth story where, yeah, you're supposed to hate her at first. She's not great. But by the end of it, she's more of the Snow White that we kind of know and love.
What about the girl from the upper class? Is there going to be a story about her, the one that she befriends?
Oh, Aurelia?
Yeah.
So she actually is Goldilocks. Her name Aurelia Lockley. Aurelia means gold. Lockley is locks, play on words. So she's actually our main character in the second book. That's her whole story. Every character is slightly introduced before the next book. Each book has its own main character. So in the third book, you actually don't meet Cinderella ahead of time, but you meet her prince ahead of time in one of the other books. So you still kind of get to know them. The stories are mostly standalones, although I do recommend getting them in order to get the full fulfillment of kind of the overarching villains that occur. But yeah, each one has its own kind of lead, and they have their own story, and you get to kind of get to know them beforehand. So yeah, we do get to meet Goldilocks and Snow White's story.
Okay. What about the apple soap? What was this? That was so cute. It was the twist. So how did you come up with that?
That was just kind of a spur of the moment idea. I really wanted to like throw a twist into the poison apple situation because it's very, everyone knows how Snow White gets poisoned. Everyone knows either the Disney version or the Grimm's version. And so I wanted to try to make people think they knew what was happening and then kind of pull the rug out from under them and be like, just kidding. It's not actually a poison apple. It's, the poison soap that you're cleaning everybody's laundry in. So it was more just me trying to reinvent the wheel and think like, okay, if the apple's the wheel, how can I redo this and clue it in just enough that the audience might know what it is, but most of them will be surprised.
I definitely think they'll be surprised. I mean, it was a great young adult coming of age type novel. Your first love, exceptional layout, and editing with the whole storyline. It was just brilliant twist. Because usually when you pick these up, you're like, okay, what could they possibly do? And then I was like, wow, she really did it. And you kept all those, elements in it. The apple, the huntsman.
There's a little bit of the mirror in there too.
Oh, the mirror too, yes. That was funny. So the thing that comes up though is like, is the bad guy really good or is he really, really bad?
Well, there's a couple bad guys if you kind of think about it. There
were a lot of bad guys.
So the bad guy that you're probably thinking of, that's like the bad guy of this story that you're not sure if he's good or bad in the end. He's the spoiler bad guy where it's like, what's he up to? But there's actually some kind of secondary bad guys like the Huntsman and the Huntsman's Kingdom, and they're kind of overarching bad guys who carry on throughout even up to the fifth book. So you don't really get the end of their story until you finish the series. So it kind of leaves you hanging a little bit, even though each book has its own happy ending that's pretty conclusive. You're always still wondering in the back of your head, like, what's going on that side of the realm? Like, what are they doing over there?
Are happy endings important to you?
They definitely are in this specific series because they're fairy tales and you really want to end on, the sweet romance and the guy getting the girl and the princess running away with her prince. So all of them in this series, even though they have kind of a lingering plot line that's not fully left resolved, they all end on something that makes you feel good in the end.
Yeah, that was a really good twist. It was, because you dragged us through so much turmoil to get there that we really appreciated it in the end.
Yeah, it was very, very satisfying, I think is how I like to refer to it.
All right. So a lot of it's centered on the challenge of being different. So where do you draw on to write about that and actually make the reader feel that, that essence of just being different, of feeling awkward or, not feeling right in your skin? So.
Yeah. So, in this specific story, like your character feels different and awkward whenever she's like not in her royal castle anymore. You know, she's working with these 7 mill maids in a laundry mill and doesn't know the difference between soap and water almost, and is trying to figure this all out. And I don't know where that really comes from. I think it's just kind of like trying to put your characters in a place that's uncomfortable and just kind of flying off from there and seeing where that goes. And like, I know that I personally, when writing these stories, try to be different when I'm reinventing a story that's been retold, you know, 100+ thousand times, because even Disney's a retelling of it when you think back to it.
That's
So
true.
it's just kind of, yeah, a lot of people don't think about that, but it's, you really just want to like imagine what it is and then imagine what it could have been and then just kind of veer off in that direction and then follow your characters with you and just kind of make them see that same perspective. It's like, okay, let's make you as uncomfortable as I was when I was veering off from what I thought I knew what the story was going to be.
Aw. All right. So what else is your background that why did you get into writing? Like how
So
did that
funnily
start?
enough, I wanted to be like I wanted to do creative writing and almost actually pursued an English degree. And then I found out that I would have to take like 3 more science courses in a foreign language and thought it sounded miserable. And then I looked at a theater degree and I was like, oh, do stage makeup? Yeah, that sounds way better. And so I switched it all and never ended up studying English at all. And then less than a year ago, in July of 2022, I had some time off work and I just kind of sat down and I was just feeling this strike of inspiration. I was like, I'm just going to try to write a book. And here I am almost a year later and I've got 5.5 written. And so I just kind of, I don't really have a good explanation for why, other than it was always something I knew I wanted to do and just didn't really commit to studying up on it. But then when I jumped into it, it just kind of was instinctual. It was something that I really loved and I just really wanted to dedicate the time to. And I didn't really have to like, it didn't feel like a chore. It didn't feel like something that I needed to like stop and research everything. It just happened really naturally. And then I would go back and fix what needed fixed. But yeah, it was just kind of a hobby that turned into a passion that's turning into a career.
That's great. Congratulations. All
Thank
right.
you.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you met your husband? Because you seem to have a really good romantic side. That's believable with, all the awkwardness and timing and, little idiosyncrasies that go along with it.
Yeah. So my husband was actually the first and only person I ever dated. So that might key into a lot of the first romance stuff I write about. But we met completely virtually. Introduced us through my sister. They went to the same college here in Tennessee. I lived in Indiana. And the entire time we were dating, we lived 6 hours apart. So before we were married, we only probably saw each other in person for like 4 weeks total. And the way he actually got me to agree to date him was he drove 10 hours in one day to visit me at my college, 5 hours there, took me to a restaurant, and 5 hours home in the same day. So very much a romantic gesture on his part. And we were only dating for a year before we decided we were like, we're done with long distance. Let's get married, and have been very happy ever since. So he's definitely a good inspiration for my love stories.
Oh, how long have you been married?
It'll be 2 years in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. But you do have a soft side for romance.
I definitely do. I love like sweet, fluffy, clean romances that just kind of make you feel good in the end and smile about it.
It really does that. It was such a pleasant book to read. I did have a cup of tea with it, but it was just fun. And then I think the cover helps too with the descriptions and the time period that you put it in. So did you have to do a lot of history for that part of it? Research?
Not so much. One of the classes that I studied was period styles in college, where we studied different like time periods and stuff. And a lot of that just kind of stuck with me. And I always build a Pinterest board when I'm writing a story to kind of give me like references of clothing and people and scenery and things like that, where I'll have friends and family take pictures of things for me. Like maybe like a snowy space or something to kind of relate to. And so I kind of like we'll just go off of that. But a lot of that research kind of stuck with me, and I still even have my textbook from that I flipped through a couple times. So I guess technically, yeah, I do some research, but it's on things that I already have in front of me, and I just kind of go from there and then expand a little bit outwards, because even though it's kind of like Victorian-ish inspired, it's still fantasy. So I kind of tweak it a little bit to what fits and what feels a little bit more natural for the story.
And how many books are going to be in this series when you're done?
There's going to be 5 books in this series, and I'm doing a follow-up series, which is still going to be fairy tale retellings, but just in a different kind of realm, and that will be 5 books as well.
Wow, you're going to be busy. And you had, it only took 1 year to get 5 done?
6.
Oh, 6
I've got,
done?
yeah, well, I've been busy. I only work part-time, so I have a lot of free time. But I finished the first 5 around February, and then I finished the first book in the second series, and I'm taking a pause from that one to pursue a different series idea, and I'm about 20,000 words into that one at the moment. So I've and a short story thrown in there somewhere in the middle.
What advice do you give young people about literacy and reading?
I would say just always look for something that you enjoy. I was not a big reader, honestly, before I started writing. I read a couple books here and there, but once I kind of found my niche and I found that I liked clean fantasy romances, I found that I like fairy tale retellings, that's when I really started feeling passionate about books and writing and reading. So I would say definitely like find something that caters to your interests and then just kind of divert from there, whatever like kind of calls to you.
Was there anybody in particular when you were going through school that helped influence you as a teacher?
Hmm. You know, I think just everyone kind of like since I did it like I don't know. I was definitely more of a reserved person. I was kind of a book nerd without the books. I was definitely a kept to myself kind of person. But I definitely think I had a couple teachers who really like encouraged me and steered me in the direction. Back when I was in high school, I actually was very heavily studying early childhood, and I had a teacher named Mrs. Lowry who was amazing if she ever sees this. But she was very encouraging towards everything that we did because she was a teacher for teachers. She was an early childhood teacher, and she definitely encouraged us to kind of like expand beyond what we think that we're going towards. So I probably her was one of my big ones.
And what about being a nanny? Is that a tough job? How many children do you care for?
It is definitely a tough job sometimes. I absolutely love it, but it is absolutely a job. It is not a babysitting gig like some people like to imagine. And I care for 2 children right now. One's 1, one's 3. They're absolutely darling. Before I cared for them, when I still lived in Indiana, I cared for 5 girls for a different family. I was their nanny. One was 3 months when I started, and the oldest was 8 years old. And then everyone in between. So it's definitely a passion. I love doing it. I love being able to interact one-on-one with the kids. I've done daycares before, but nannying is just a lot more personal, and you get to watch them grow a lot more. And it's definitely something that encourages me to like dive into the fairy tales and kind of like explore, and like their imagination as kids is also just very inspiring to come up with your own ideas and just watch the world through their eyes.
You must use some of that to incorporate into your stories because they're really well done. It's so believable, the twists that you put in.
Thank you. I definitely try.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much about how you create this wonderful series. We're looking forward to seeing what you come up with next.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
It was wonderful. Until next time, keep asking questions. And if you want a great series to read, The Emerald Realm, starting with book 1, Poison Heart, it will just totally sweep you away. They're just so much fun to read. And it's really great for young people. We'll see you soon.